Today is the tissues of the body, part 1. We have 4 main types of tissues. We have our epithelial tissues, we have our muscle tissues, our connective tissues, and our nervous tissues. When we look at tissues under the microscope, we call it histology. Histo meaning tissue, ology the study of. Our histology is going to be the microscopic study of the tissues and plants. We see bone tissue here and cartilage tissue, skin tissue, adipose, which is fat tissue, neuro tissue, cardiac muscle, and skeletal muscle. Cells to organ system. Well, we know that cells combine together to form tissues. Tissues form organs, organs form organ systems. So when our cells come together, we have 4 primary types of tissues that they can create: epithelial, connective, muscle, and nerve. Well, today we're going to be talking about the epithelial tissues. Part 2 is connective, Part 3 is muscle, and Part 4 is nerve. Epithelium. There are 2 types: membranous epithelia, which is our coverings or linings of our organs, and we have glandular epithelia, which form exocrine and endocrine glands. Our epithelial tissue is widespread throughout the body. It is the covering and lining of our body surfaces, the lining of the cavities and our hollow organs, and it is the major tissue in glands. They function as protection, secretion, absorption, excretion, filtration, diffusion, and sensory receptors. Now, cells in the epithelium are tightly packed together with very little intracellular matrix. And since they are covering and lining, they have one free surface that is not connected to any other cell. The types of epithelial tissues. We have simple squamous, which does not have a regular shape to it. We have simple cuboidal, which are going to be cubes. And we have simple columnar, which are going to be columns. Now, in simple, we see one layer. So we see one row of nuclei in our simple cuboidal. And we see one row of nuclei. And we see one row of nuclei in our simple columnar. Now, when we get to stratified, that's going to be multiple layers. Stratified squamous is multiple layers of our squamous cells. Stratified cuboidal, multiple cuboidal layers. And then we have pseudo-stratified columnar. Now, pseudo means false. So it's not actually 2 layers of columns. It's 2 false layers of columns. But we do see 2 layers of nuclei. And then we have our transitional, which is multiple different types laid on top of each other. Now, our simple cuboidal is found in our glandular tissue in our kidney tubes. We see simple columnar in our stomach lining and our intestinal lining. We see the pseudo-stratified columnar in the portions of our respiratory tract and portions of the male reproductive tract. Transitional epithelium can be distended or stretched. We also see glandular epithelium as a specialized tissue that produces and secretes substances. In our stomach, we see one layer for a simple columnar form of cells that make up the tissue. We see it along the lining of our entire stomach. It is at the top. And remember, these must continue to grow and undergo mitosis because of the hydrochloric acid housed within the stomach. We see squamous cells in our lungs. We see cuboidal in our ovaries. And we see transitional, which means multiple kinds, in our oral cavity. Glandular epithelia. Well, we know that the basic principle of biology is that structure is closely related to function. So, if our epithelial cells start folding in and create a duct or a way to go outside of the body, This is going to be an exocrine gland, allowing things to leave the body, or a substance to leave the body, such as a sweat gland. Now, if the fold then degrades up top and forms a gland inside that does not have a way out, it is called an endocrine gland, and it will produce substances for inside of the body. Here we see stratified squamous in our skin, and here we see simple columnar in our intestinal lining. And when we talk about the skin tissue, or the integumentary system, we talk about 3 different layers: our epidermis, our dermis, and our subcutaneous layer, or hypodermis. Let's take a look at them. Our epidermis contains 5 layers. The stratum corneum is a dead top layer that contains keratin protein. The stratum germinatum is the 2 most bottom layers, and they're living. They are close to the blood to get blood supply, and they undergo mitosis. The melanocytes, that meaning cells, so these are the cells that create melanin, are between the 2 bottommost living cells, or living layers, in our epidermis. They produce melanin and inject it into what will become the uppermost layer of our skin. The brown melanin will absorb UV light, protecting the bottommost living layers from the UV light coming in and damaging its DNA. Next we move down to the dermis. The dermis is mostly collagen and elastin fibers. It also does contain the hair follicles and the sweat glands. So hair follicles, which have hair made of keratin protein, which is non-living, function as a sun blocker. They also have an erecti pilli, which can contract and force the hair to stand straight up. You also see goosebumps with this. The subcutaneous or hypodermis is mostly consisted of adipose tissues containing oil. Now we're going to draw out this in class, but you do need to know the parts. Well, that's all I have for you today, and have a great day.